So I'm at the car dealer, so if you hear any weird announcements or background noise, I apologize. I'm going to try to make this video about writing the first paper as quick as possible. This, by the way, is just our landing page, which I have listed up here as updates and review. Blackboard calls it announcements. To find the paper, the best thing to do is go to assignments and wait for it. Come on, assignments. Open the folder for the first paper. And I would recommend that you start by looking at the rubric to get an idea of exactly how I'm going to grade it and what's expected. Now, we've read lots of sources in the past, 6 weeks, 8 weeks or so. What I want you to do is think about what you've learned about African American culture and what makes it distinctive and what makes it important, particularly in the United States. So something that's always important is to have a title, and the title shouldn't be "What is culture?" or African American culture. It should be a quote, something like from Hayden, "The deep, immortal human wish" would be a good title, because that's a quote from something we read and it resonates with the topic of the class. The second thing that you want is something called an epigraph, which is just something that sets the tone of your paper and your main evidence. I'd like you to have 2 of those, and the instructions say Du Bois or Coates, but if there is something else from Baldwin or another author that you really would like to use instead of Du Bois or instead of Coates, that's also okay, as long as it's one of our readings thus far and it contributes to your explanation of culture. Then I want you to explain in your own words what the quotes mean, and to use topic sentences, and to define culture in your own words. So, for example, when we look at the Hurston and Wright debate, Richard Wright thinks that culture should have a protest purpose, it should have a political purpose, and it should bring about social change. Zora Neale Hurston, on the other hand, thinks that culture should be just something that is beautiful and something that people can enjoy. It doesn't necessarily have to protest racism, as Wright thinks. So after you have looked at the rubric, I have some quick start suggestions as well. And in the quick start, it says collect your evidence. In the second Du Bois folder, there is a Padlet that has several quotes that people collected from last year. So if you go to the Criteria of Negro Art folder and you look at this Padlet, these quotes actually come from Du Bois and from Coates, from the Criteria of Negro Art and from the Conservation of Races. So there are a lot of quotes here you might want to use for your epigraph. Or like I said, if you really want to use something from Baldwin or from Hayden, that's also all right with me. I just prefer that you use readings from the class. You can even use something from Malcolm X's Bullet or the Ballot, particularly if you think culture should be political and should bring about social change. So there's the Padlet. I'm going to go back to the paper assignment again, and I'm going to show you the sample papers. Because if you look at first the quick start, then you look at the sample papers, then that can help you see what you're aiming for. So here's a sample paper with a quote from Du Bois and a quote from Coates. And actually this person added a third quote. And part of the question is whether race and culture are the same thing. Is culture something that people create intentionally? Is race a real thing, or is it a social construct? Those kind of questions complicate this paper and give you lots of options for how you can answer. So you see how this person speaks in the first person, says I, and defines race and defines culture and explains what they think about how Du Bois and Coates define culture. I see culture as a collective society, one that goes through experiences together. You and I and we are particular quotes from this. You and I have been breasting hills and have been climbing. We can see it day by day that culture is growing. So here is another sample. And this doesn't have epigraphs. Oh, actually, this person put the epigraphs within the body of the paper. Epigraph usually means the beginning, but this person did a perfectly good job putting the quotes right within the paper. So that is what I expect you to do to get some ideas for the paper. Really, the goal of the paper, according to the course outcomes, are to understand contemporary influences in African American culture and how they define culture, but I also want you to define it yourself based upon what you've read and what really spoke to you in the readings. So if you have, when you finish your paper, or if you have questions about proofreading, this is in the quick start. This is some suggestions for revising. And also, when you write your paper, if you want to double check the making a point, put the smiley face by your thesis, put the stars next to your definitions of race and culture, then I welcome you to do that too. That's just a proofreading strategy that you can incorporate. Certainly stop by my office hours or email me if you have any other questions about this assignment. I just wanted to make sure you saw all these resources, and I am going to cut out of here before they start making announcements on the loudspeaker while I get my car fixed. Have a great week.